Thank you very much, Adam, and hello, everyone. Thank you for spending your lunchtime with Adam and myself as we delve into what we like to call a Workers' Comp 101. I'd like to say hi to any old friends who have joined us for this webinar. I see you. And I'd like to reiterate what Adam is mentioning about the provider webinar, which is people will pose questions to us ahead of time, and we always appreciate that. We did have a bunch of questions about provider-type topics that are more in-depth than what we covered today, so I'm really recommending you check out that provider webinar at 2 p.m. today. I will also be watching that webinar, just so you know, because we always learn. All right, so let's begin at the beginning. Before there's ever an accident, before there's ever an incident, well, we don't want accidents and incidents. Here's something you can do to try and mitigate their ever happening. To create a safer workplace, we suggest you form what's known as a Labor Management Safety Committee. This is a very old and entrenched and established practice, particularly in union shops. And so here's how you can do it. Create a committee with an equal number of workers and managers. Rotate the chair of that committee after a certain period of time. Meet regularly with an agenda, okay? And then discuss the incidents, discuss the places, I should say, and the processes in your workplace that is creating incidents, that are creating incidents, or could create a potential incident, because we want to mitigate these things before they even happen. Get out of the conference room, go out into the workplace. And also, review the equipment you're using. Make sure it hasn't been modified. Make sure it's, it's been maintained. Make sure that you're using it according to the manufacturer's specs. Make sure that you're operating it in the safest possible way, and your procedures. Why don't you make sure that you've established safe procedures and you've documented them, and that you're also training for safety, okay? The whole idea here is let's avoid incidents if possible. Turning now to the workers' comp system, this is a worker's right. It also protects employers because it removes liability from their considerations because they bought an insurance policy. But workers' comp, the grand bargain they call it between labor and business, it is a no-fault insurance system. That means that there's an insurance policy somewhere. That's what's probably going to pay the benefits. The employers have to carry this insurance, and they cannot charge the workers for the cost of this insurance, so there won't be a deduction on a paycheck. And it's going to protect the workers for an on-the-job injury or illness. If you were injured or made sick at work, you're entitled to workers' comp. It's your right. It cannot be negotiated away, and it cannot be signed away. Think of the benefits I'm giving you today as the floor in workers' comp. It is possible to negotiate a richer benefit, but these are the legal benefits that have to be provided. Also, this is a frequent question. Immigration status is not a factor. I really can't be any more blunt about that. It's just not a factor. There are no questions about a person's immigration status in our system, and it never comes into play. Finally, language assistance services are available from the board. We recognize that in New York State, over 100 different languages are probably spoken in New York State. We recognize that Queens is the most diverse borough, linguistically speaking, in the state and probably in the country too. Yeah, so that means that we have the ability to translate and interpret for injured workers, and we do it for free. We also have our materials available in the 9 languages that more than 91% of New Yorkers speak, and that's on our website. Here's mine and Adam's employer, the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. We are the administrator of the system. We oversee the system. We do not pay the claims, except in one small instance I'll talk about in a few minutes. You know, we have about 1,000 employees and 26 offices and hearing points across the state. Our role is to make sure the system operates well and correctly, and we, to do that, receive reports of the injuries and the payments and the medical reports and all the other documents important in a claim. We also will hold hearings in front of one of our administrative law judges when a hearing is appropriate to move a claim forward or adjudicate it. Not all claims have hearings. Okay, this is my office now, the Office of the Advocate for Injured Workers. It's an ombudsman's office. That means that we care about the health of the system, and we help workers with the most difficult and complicated claims. We're here to help. We also have a key role in the beginning of a fatality claim because there are benefits for workers who perish due to employment. We help the surviving family or the executor claim that benefit. And we also work directly with the 9/11 community. So if you're not in the New York metro area, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but 9/11 is still being felt today. Finally, I report directly to the chair of the board, and I bring her system issues, and then the agency tries to resolve them. Okay, new topic. We're getting into it now. Who pays a workers' compensation claim? Well, I mentioned before insurance. There are two ways to do it. There's insurance, and then there's also self-insurance. An insurance adjuster can contact the ombudsman, yes. I'm reading the questions as they come in, and yes, go ahead. There is actually one adjuster actually at one insurer who has contacted us several times because, well, he actually brings to our attention injured workers when he can't help them anymore, but he thinks we might be able to, or they might need a special service. So, yes, go ahead. If you're an adjuster and you feel a need to contact us, go ahead, and if we can work with you, we certainly will. Sorry to get distracted there. So we're back to who's paying the claim. Well, an adjuster is going to be paying that claim if the employer has purchased an insurance policy. Then the insurance carrier, the term we use is carrier, the carrier is going to pay the benefits from that policy. The other way to create this insurance is what's called self-insurance. That means an employer is of a significant enough size in terms of revenue and financial creditworthiness that the employer can self-insure. So that goes two ways in New York State. Number one is almost all government entities in New York State are self-insured. Not all of them, but it is seemingly the popular choice among government entities. They self-insure because a government's not going out of business. The other way to do it, there are about 115 very, very large employers in the state of New York who have chosen to self-insure. And they work with our finance department. They have creditworthiness. Everything is established well there. So these two types of employers self-insure, and what you need to know if you're a worker or a worker advocate is that they usually hire a claim administrator to handle the actual claims. Not always, but almost always, they hire a claim administrator. Now, the technical term for that entity is a third-party administrator, or TPA. We have a huge number of acronyms in this system. I don't like to use them, but I will just introduce you to them. So the TPA, the administrator, is going to be paying the claim for that self-employed. And then finally, I did mention there is one instance when the board pays claims, and that is the instance when the employer is not carrying insurance, and it should be. That's not frequent, but it does happen, and we have something called the no insurance unit. So the no insurance unit here at the board gets the claim, and then the claim gets handled like every other claim. If you're a worker and you don't think your employer is carrying insurance, definitely still file the claim. You will be held harmless, to use a little insurance jargon. Definitely file the claim, because the no insurance unit and the uninsured employers fund here at the board, they will advance the payments on the claim, and then we will bill the owner of the business to pay it back. So there definitely are repercussions for someone who's not carrying coverage and should. Okay, moving into who needs coverage. Well, it's pretty simple. Business. Business by definition here is for-profit. If you're a for-profit and you have one part-time employee, you need coverage. It's that simple. Most not-for-profits who have employees, they're probably going to be required to have coverage as well. The not-for-profit status is not going to absolve an employer from the responsibility to carry insurance unless. Here's your unless. If we're in the not-for-profit world, teachers and clergy do not have to be covered under policies, but otherwise, yeah, everyone else probably does. However, anyone who's providing services to a for-profit business might be determined to be an employee. We get the question frequently about internet-based businesses, ride-sharing, delivery, all of that, all of those businesses which are proliferating today. Well, the term independent contractor is used very frequently now, and let me explain to you what an independent contractor is in this system. An independent contractor is someone who is not under the direction and control of the potential employer. Not. So the test we use is essentially, there's more, but essentially, is the worker under the direction and control of the potential employer? Here's where it gets confusing. Just think of all of the government entities who talk about independent contractors. Workers' Comp Board, New York State Department of Labor, Federal Department of Labor, New York State Taxation and Finance, the Federal IRS. Those are 5 different governmental agencies on the state and federal level who are all operating under their own laws. That's the thing. Each law that each of those agencies is operating under is going to govern who's an independent contractor and who is not. So the advice, you're a worker, you get hurt, somebody tells you you're an independent contractor, that's nice, file the claim, okay? Let us sort it out. File the claim, please. All right. What do you do if there's an injury or an illness? Well, here are the steps. Please bookmark this one. Number 1, get the necessary medical treatment promptly. As quickly as you can, get your medical care. You don't need to be directed to a particular provider. We had a question ahead of time. We had a question ahead of time about preferred provider organizations, PPOs. And yes, there are things called PPOs where you could be directed to a particular provider if you were a worker, but that doesn't prevail in an emergency situation such as this, and we'll talk more about that later. So go to the nearest best provider you can. Number 2, you're a worker. Tell your employer in writing that there was an incident. This is called notice. Yes, your employer absolutely should know about an incident because maybe the employer will mitigate the circumstances that created the incident, but it's also something that you have to do to move your claim forward. Then, even though the employer has to tell its insurance company who has to file a notice with the board, otherwise it gets penalized, even though we still recommend that the employees fill in their own claim form, known as the C3. It's a backstop in case the employer and the insurer fail in that responsibility, but it's a way for you to put your side down and for you to list everything that happened as you're reporting it. And you can do this on paper or you can do it online. Please do it online if you can, because it's much quicker, it's much easier, it's cheaper, and we can read it reliably because we do still get handwriting. You can get that from the board website. You can also get a list of New York State self-insured employers on the website. Someone asked that question. Our website has a bazillion resources. I urge you to check it out. Finally, after you've seen the doctor and after you've filed the claim, you should continue receiving necessary treatment for that injury. Now, we have a small quiz here, and I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, you'll see on your screen here we have a scenario, and I'll read off the bullet points to you, and then if you could just please enter your response in the chat box. We have Kadir, who is not an American citizen, and he's in the United States on a work visa. He works 40 hours a week on site at a software company. Uses the desk with the company's equipment, using the tasks the company gives him. He works 8 hours a day. His start and end times vary, but he's working on a 1099, so the software firm considers him an independent contractor. One day, Kadir is inattentive, and he drops a computer server and fractures his leg. The employer calls an ambulance that takes Kadir to the hospital to get treatment. Now, knowing all this and what Joe has just mentioned to you about workers' comp and everything, do you think Kadir should file a workers' comp claim? And we are getting lots of yeses, yeses, yes, yes. It's a unanimous, all yeses. Joe, what do we think here?
I love the yeses. Kadir certainly should file that claim. Number one, let us sort it out. But number two, you didn't fall for any of the red herrings in there. The fact that he's not a citizen, he's inattentive. It doesn't matter if Kadir was inattentive. This is a no-fault insurance system. And by the way, the software firm considers him an independent contractor. Well, that's lovely, but there's nothing in those 5 bullets that leads you to think that maybe we would consider him an independent contractor under our law, because we're trying to show you that Kadir could make the argument that this employer was exercising direction and control. All right, we're going to switch now to the benefits. There are 2 primary benefits, and then there's also the fatality benefit, which we'll speak about. We're going to begin with the medical benefits. There's no cost to the worker for medically necessary treatment for the work-related injury or illness. I know that's obvious, but it never hurts to say it. This is for treatment of the established injury or illness. And by the way, here's another obvious thing. This is a lifetime benefit. So unless a worker signs a lump sum settlement in the very old days or a Section 32 agreement today that closes that medical eligibility in exchange for a payment, unless the worker and the insurer agree to close that in exchange for a payment, that's a lifetime benefit. So I say this in the nicest possible way to all of our colleagues at insurers and TPAs. If a worker should contact you and talk about medical care for an injury that occurred many, many, many years ago, please don't tell the worker that claim is closed unless it is truly closed. I understand you have reserving, and I understand you have different processes internal to your corporations, but unless there was a settlement, that claim is not closed for medical care. So please don't tell the workers that. And I only say this because about once or twice a month, somebody contacts me and asks me that question and reports it's happened. Okay, The other medical expenses can be covered, like lab tests and hospitalizations, medication, of course. There's the whole formulary process, and I would encourage you to check out that 2 o'clock webinar. The benefits are the same regardless of the carrier, yes. Transportation costs are also reimbursable for travel to and from medical appointments. So medical appointments, it's not to and from a hearing. But if you're a worker, there's a form called the C-257. I would encourage you to get that form and fill it in. And it's going to ask for the date and who you saw, where you started, where you went, where you ended. You know, and you can use an internet tool to get the number of miles because we do reimburse by the mile. But, you know, if you start traveling some distances, it could add up, and there is no time limit here. So if you have not submitted expenses from a previous year, if you need to go back, go on ahead because there is no time limit. Okay. Here's a best practice regarding medical care. If you're a worker and you're receiving what are called ongoing disability payments, and by that we mean you're out of work and you're getting the payment every 2 weeks, that's called ongoing disability. If you are in temporary status, which you're going to be unless you've been classified permanent, but you'll know that if that's happened. So if you're in temporary status and you're getting these ongoing payments, would you please be sure to see the provider every 90 days at a minimum, because you need the provider to give an opinion on your degree of disability. How disabled are you? If you're 0% disabled, then you're healthy, you can go back to work. If you're 100% disabled, that's the provider saying, I don't believe that this worker can return to employment. You need that every 90 days at minimum because your payments could be interrupted if you don't have it. And of course, every medical practice on this webinar right now is going to be happy when I say, if you're an injured worker, please show up to your appointments with your board case number, the WCB case number. It'll probably start with the letter G for George if it's recent. And then also show up with the name of the insurer and the insurer's case number. That allows our provider to bill for services and file services, and anything we can do to help the providers, we should. Here's a best practice. There's something called an independent medical exam. You're a worker, you're hurt, the insurer can ask you to attend an independent medical exam. That is an instance where the insurer has decided to hire a physician to evaluate you. And there are certain circumstances where this can happen, and what the examiner is looking for will be stated to you ahead of time. They might say something like check degree of disability, with that item I was talking about before. So if you're a worker and you have to go to this, here are some things you should know. Number one, well, if you have to go, you have to go. But number two, you can bring a witness. That has not changed during COVID. That has not changed an iota. You may also record the exam. You can capture the video and the audio. You want to use your cell phone camera? Go on ahead. Also, there's going to be a report generated. You're the worker. You really should be reading that report. And then if you have an attorney, checking in with the attorney and letting the attorney know if there's anything in that report you don't remember happening or you don't see on the video. Just let the attorney know. If you don't have an attorney and you have questions about that, you can contact the Advocate for Injured Workers. Okay, we'll have our contact information up in a moment. The reason why is that because we're concerned about system health, we receive complaints about IME conduct. Conduct. That's different from your doctor says you're 100% disabled and the IME says you're 25% disabled. I'm sorry, you're going to have to litigate that. That's not conduct. But, if it's a circumstance like the one that we all know about in my office, where a man in a wheelchair was sent to an IME in the same facility for the second time, and the wheelchair does not fit into the exam room, and the doctor chooses to do the exam in the waiting room. Yes, the doctor did clear the waiting room, but that's not appropriate. That's a conduct issue. That's the kind of thing you want to tell us about, because we do license these IME companies. The board does. And then finally, travel reimbursement is payable to workers. All right, this is a 101, so we do move quickly, and I do give you the top level. So I'm going to switch now to the cash benefit. This is known as the indemnity benefit, if you would like to know the jargon. 2/3 of a worker's average weekly wage is payable while the worker is out on workers' compensation if the worker is 100% disabled. So what happens? Okay, worker gets injured, 100% disabled, can't work. Step one, how much was the worker earning? That's what we call the average weekly wage of the person. And then the benefit for 100% disability is 2/3 of that amount. And that's tax-free. This includes all compensation, ladies and gentlemen. If you're tipped, well, you need to include the tip amounts. If you receive a perk, such as an easy example is you're the super of a building in the Bronx and you get injured and you have a free apartment, there's a monetary value for that free apartment that gets added into the basis of your weekly wage. The maximum benefit is now $1,063.05 a week. That is up on your screen. That adjusts every July 1st. And it's based on New York State's average payroll. So in the great state of New York, in the year 2020, that's the last year we have the data from, in the year 2020, the average payroll was about $82,900 a year per worker. That's an average. That means that this is an example of when it's good to have Wall Street and the New York Yankees and some Hollywood people living in your state because they push the average up for everyone. Also, the benefits in the comp system are temporary, because, you're probably going to heal and go back to work unless they're permanent. Okay, some people don't fully heal, and they could have a permanent total disability or a permanent partial disability. But the injuries begin as temporary, and then when the worker gets to the point where the worker's as well as he or she's ever going to be, that's when it gets evaluated for permanency. Also, if you are a worker and you get paid in cash, please take a tip from me. Every time you get paid, write down some way, in some manner, write down what you got paid for doing, and when you got paid. Because now you have a record of your payments, and you just might need that one day for workers' comp or in any other situation where you need to demonstrate your earnings. And then finally, the other big benefit is there are payments for the loss of use of a limb. So if you hurt your arm and it doesn't come back 100%, well, there's a benefit for that. It's called schedule loss of use. Now, here is something that is very exciting. Some people, like myself, really wanted this to happen, and it did. As of last July 1st, all insurance payers must offer direct deposit. If you are a worker, I do not know why you would not take this. In other words, if you're a worker, please sign up for direct deposit. We get so many inquiries from people who never received a check. And there are postal situations and there are other situations. Sign up for direct deposit, please. Okay, here's the other main benefit. It is the fatality benefit. This is payable in instances where a worker perishes due to employment. That can be an incident, that could be a consequence of a previous incident, or it could be an illness such as COVID. Yes. Oh, okay, here are the benefits. First is the funeral or memorial expense. There are two different amounts that are reimbursable. So it's reimbursable. It's not paid ahead of time. In the New York metro area, New York City, Long Island, Westchester, Rockland, it's up to $12,500. And then in the rest of New York, it's $10,500. The benefit is calculated in the same manner as the indemnity benefit. However, there is a bit of what I will call a hierarchy in the death benefit, which means the first beneficiary is the spouse, the lawfully wed spouse. Gender is not a factor here. Then come the children of the decedent, of the person who died, okay? Unless, it was a blended family, and if the person who died adopted children, okay, they're potential beneficiaries as well. And they have age maximums, 18 years of age or 23 if they're attending college or, as we call it, an accredited institution of higher learning. Okay, so the benefit goes spouse or spouse and children, or if there's no spouse, children until they age out. And then finally, there are disabled or blind dependents. They could also share the benefit. Everybody would share the benefit. They don't each get the maximum amount. If none of these parties exist, $50,000 is payable to the parents. If the parents don't exist, then $50,000 is payable to the estate, and we will be dealing with the executor. So if there are distant relations, they're going to have to deal with the estate. If the relation is not on that list I gave, they have to deal with the estate. Finally, we like to say this, there is a national nonprofit called Kids Chance. We have no affiliation with them. However, we know about them. They're a national nonprofit, and they provide scholarships to the children of workers who have perished due to employment or who were grievously injured. Okay, this organization, I know for a fact, is open to scholarship applications. So your website's right on screen, kcnewyork.org. I would encourage you to check it out if this is right for you or someone you know. Now, COVID-19. COVID-19 is payable in New York State's workers' comp system. And the reason I say it that way is that each state has its own system. I can only speak about New York's, but absolutely, COVID-19 is an infectious disease. Infectious diseases are payable in the New York State system. We refer to them as compensable rather than payable, but just so you know. Okay, if this should happen to you, if you believe you were exposed, contracted COVID due to your employment, here's what you should know. Number one, file a claim. Number two, tell your employer. The medical reports are going to be key. There's going to be a test result somewhere probably. If you have a PCR test result, great. You have another test result, okay, file that test result. If you got sick in March or April of 2020 and you got your results by phone, which used to happen back then, you can get it on paper now. Get it on paper and file it. And please, March of 2020, there's a 2-year window of time to file a claim. That's across the board, ladies and gentlemen, except in the the World Trade Center arena, but put that aside for a moment. 2 years to file a claim. So if you got sick in March 2020, April 2020, we're in month 21, 22 here. So get those claims in, please. Okay, if you see your doctor, you should have a frank conversation with the doctor and let the doctor know the details of your workplace, such as, number one, Did you have public contact? Were masks worn? Did you wear a mask? Did your coworker? Did the public? Is COVID-19 prevalent in the workplace? If you're wondering to yourself how you're going to prove this if you're not a healthcare worker, here's the standard that we use. Is COVID-19 prevalent in the workplace? You do not need to point to a moment in time when you think you were exposed. You do not need that. However, if you can demonstrate that COVID is prevalent in your workplace and you contracted COVID, well, you should be filing that claim. Also, are there any other circumstances the providers should know about, or if you file the claim, that your attorney should know about, or that the board should know about? Are there any other circumstances we should know? Finally, we do have a fact sheet, and we do have a short video on the website on the topic of COVID. I participated very deeply in the creation of these things, so I think they're pretty good. I would urge you to please check them out and file the COVID claims if you think you were made sick due to your employment. Adam is back now with another quiz.
Yes, you will now see another scenario on your screen. Once again, just type your answer in the chat box. We have our friend Liz, who works at the front desk of a cardiology practice, and she checks patients in and out, handles copays. One day she feels ill, calls in sick to work. The cardiologist recommends she get a COVID test, which comes back positive. Liz receives her paid sick leave for the 2 weeks of work she misses before testing negative and returning to work. During this time, she's been very vigilant about following COVID protocols. She's been wearing her mask. She's been social distancing, all that good stuff. Liz knows that the office has treated patients with COVID in the past, and the doctor at the practice also had COVID at one point during her period of working there. Knowing all this, should Liz file a claim for COVID? And we have a couple yeses. We have a couple no's. Yes, file the claim. We got a majority yes, Joe. What do we think?
We think that this audience is getting it. There's one person who said no, but you know, not to be argumentative or anything, but yeah, that Liz should certainly file a claim. Yes. We kind of stacked it by putting her in a cardiology practice, but if we said that Liz worked in a giant box store or in a factory or doing deliveries, it would be the same. Yeah, she should certainly file the test. We talk about prevalence. Well, notice that 2 of her coworkers had COVID. That's an example of an element of prevalence. All right, there are penalties for late payment. Moving forward, new topic. The benefits have to be paid within 18 days of incident or 10 days from notice, whichever is later. And that's, the start of the benefit payments. Otherwise, a penalty is possible. Also, in the case of ongoing payments, as I was talking about earlier when we were talking about degrees of disability, the standard there is 25 days. If it's not there in 25 days or postmarked in 25 days, it's going to be late. That's why I'm telling everyone, please get direct deposit for your workers' comp benefits. When I talk about direct deposit, I'm answering a question here that came in. It's only for the workers' comp benefit. It is not for your regular paycheck. Okay, also, benefits have to be paid within 10 days of the filing of a judge's decision. And finally, it is possible to appeal a decision, appeal a claim, but if the result of the appeal means that benefits are going to be paid, interest can also be payable, particularly to medical providers. All right, workers, you do have some responsibilities in this system. Try to come back to work as soon as you're capable. You're going to work with your doctor on that because the doctor will know, will give an opinion on what you're capable of doing. They might give you some restrictions, such as, don't stand for more than an hour, don't lift anything over 5 pounds. Those are examples of restrictions. You should show them to your employer because your employer might be progressive and enlightened enough to offer you transitional duty. or what's also called light duty, as in, okay, come back, and you're going to do something different than you usually do, but something that is within your physical restrictions. This is very good for workers. All the studies show the quicker the worker comes back in a healthy and productive manner, the better the outcome for the worker and for the employer. The employer gets somebody back, gets more hands at work, and it also lightens the experience on the employer's premium. Finally, if you're a worker, you might get some inquiries or documents from the board. Please respond if we ask you to. From the board I'm talking about. It'll very clearly be from the New York State Workers' Comp Board. Look at the top of the page and you'll see our letterhead. Also, if you move, please tell everyone you moved. Please change your address. If you're going to make any agreements, understand them. Stay involved in your claim. Don't let events happen around you. And if you have an attorney or a representative, ask that individual questions. You might have a hearing. About 46% of claims actually have a hearing. So if that happens, you and your representative will attend. If you're a worker, you should attend. You should attend your hearing. We're not doing them in person. Okay, everything is still remote. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But you're permitted to have an attorney for sure. The insurance company or the administrator, they're definitely going to have an attorney. If you want to hire an attorney, you certainly can. And the hearing will be in front of one of our law judges who will make findings of fact. Witnesses might be called, depositions might be presented. We don't use the formal rules of evidence and procedure that you see represented on Law and Order and on CIS and all the TV shows. It's not like that. Our hearings tend to be very short. They can be rather friendly. It's not like television, is what I'm saying. So there's nothing to be scared of or nervous about. And if you're a worker, you definitely should be in your hearing. And on that subject, I did mention that the hearings are not in person right now due to pandemic. We call them virtual hearings. So there are two ways you can participate. And this is for all the parties. One is what we call the virtual hearings application or app. We did some groundbreaking work here. We created this app that allowed us to hold all of our hearings through the pandemic. We did not cancel hearings. Everything went on uninterrupted here for us. So you can get this app from the Google Store or the Apple Store, and it's essentially a teleconference. So you need a camera and a microphone, but it's essentially a teleconference. You will see everyone else. And if you don't want to do that, you can use the good old-fashioned phone. You can telephone in. Just make sure, if you're a worker, you need to look at your hearing notice, because you will get one, and you will have all these directions on it, and you need to call the number that's listed there at about 8:31 a.m., because we open at 8:30. Call them at 8:31 the day of the hearing. Make sure you give us the phone number that the judge will call to get you on the line, because that's how it happens. The judge calls you. Some more tips about staying involved. Visit our website, please. There's your URL, wcb.ny.gov. If you're a worker, you can sign up for eCase. Then you can see everything that's in your file. It answers a lot of questions. It's a pretty simple process. I recommend it. Talk to your legal rep if you have one. If you have trouble getting to your attorney, well, I have to tell you, attorneys really do spend between 9 and 5 every day, most of the time in hearings. So what you do is you either talk to the paralegal, or if you really need to talk to the attorney, leave a time by when you're willing to take a call. So if you're willing to take a call by 8 o'clock at night, tell the person who's taking the message that, and the good attorneys will call you back after hours. Also, your employer might not have the most current information on workers' comp. It happens because it's not their area of expertise. Talk to us. We will be able to give you the correct information. And check out that e-case because you can see all of the documents in your file. Finally, we are creating this whole new software called Onboard, and this is us telling you that the first release is coming in the very, very, very near future, and it's going to be used by the insurers and by the medical providers, or all the healthcare providers, actually. So that is coming, and that's going to be a very good thing because it means no more paper. We still have paper forms, ladies and gentlemen, and people's handwriting has not improved since the days of Abraham Lincoln. So we're going to get those paper forms out of the system, and everything should be coming in a lot quicker and a lot easier. Well, look, we are at the end here, and here's a pitch for our social media platforms. You see, we have a good 4 of them. We have the big 4. I'm really going to recommend that YouTube channel because at my last count, we had well over 75 videos out there, including monthly videos of this presentation. So if you want to get a copy of the slides, check out the video. I don't think we release the slides generally. No, but you can watch the video, and you can all get the slides and the explanation. And then here's the contact info from my office.